What I'm going to be covering with this webinar today is how to manage subcontractors in your Knowify account. This webinar is going to be a little bit more Knowify heavy than a lot of our webinars are going to be running in the future, which are going to be more generic, more just generically construction advising heavy. What I'm going to be covering partially is, a couple of pain points and use cases that are often asked about, as far as managing subcontractor costs and budgets go in our system. And I'm also going to be going over the difference between 1099 contractors and lump sum contractors. The short version that I like to kind of give as my example is that, the 1099 workers, aside from generally being hourly workers, are independent contractors that are working for your company almost as if they're a full-time employee. A lot of times we find that although these hourly workers can be picked up and set aside for another time, a lot of the time these people are working every day for the same company and they're only 1099 as a technicality. Lump sum contractors are actually going to be very similar to the end user in Knowify in that they're going to be working under a contract for you. They're going to be billing you in increments a lot of the time, and there's going to be a little bit more formality to it, and it's a lot of times a full team as opposed to just an independent person sending you the bill at the end of the day. On the inside of Knowify, just to kind of show you what the difference is going to be as far as costing goes, and I'll cover this a little bit more while I go through. The 1099 workers are going to be tracked as labor costs since they're going to be hourly. And again, since they're very similar to your own employees, that's how we like to see them, as labor costs. And it'll be able to be tracked as, check in and check out of the job site. The subcontractors that you're hiring on contract are going to be tracked as subs. This is going to be a way for you to see, how much they have billed you for, how much you're going to owe them. You can manage change orders and get a little bit more management out of them that way. Just to give you some more information on 1099 workers or 1099 contractors in general, like I said, these guys are generally tracked hourly, and that's how we'll be job costing them. Sometimes they're paid by piece, so rather than paying them hourly, let's say we are a tile contractor, we'll say we pay this person based off of how many 100 square feet of tile he installed that day, or how many, let's say he's doing kitchen remodeling, did he install a stove, did he install a fridge? A lot of times they're paid by piece. It's a little bit trickier to track that way, but it is not an uncommon practice. We track the hourly guys using the same labor burden calculator that we would use for your employees. I'll cover this a little bit while I'm going through 1099. And again, a lot of times these are actually more or less used as full-time employees for the company, and they're only 1099s out of a technicality. These people will still be working for you 40 hours a week, but they're paid as if they're 1099 workers and not, I believe the other term is W-2 workers. In Knowify, they can actually be given mobile access as if they're one of your employees that's checking in and checking out of the job site. Basically, it's just an easier way to make sure that they get their time in, so you don't have to enter it for them. It's a nice way to have them submit comments, submit images from the job site, and whenever they submit time, of course, it needs to be approved before we sync it with QuickBooks. But this is we will be able to get the time into QuickBooks under each vendor in the weekly timesheet, and I'll show you how that's going to work. And for what it's worth, for our Canadian advisors, I know you're familiar with 1099s. Of course, this is a U.S. form, so it's going to be a little bit different. But we can still track vendor time to a Canadian QuickBooks account. When you're hiring lump sum contractors, this is going to be managed differently in our system, in that it's not really costed via time submitted by the contractor, but it's actually submitted based off of how many bills are entered into the system against their contracts. Just to cover a use case of this, we see this every day. Of course, we work with tons of contractors every day here at Knowify, and even though we market mainly to trade contractors, what we're finding more and more is that small trade contractor companies are starting to kind of scale up their companies to manage some more general contracting work. We see it very commonly with painting contractors, with drywall contractors, where someone redoing part of their house, like the kitchen, will say, hey, do you mind setting up, can you repaint the walls of my kitchen? And they'll say, we also need to hire an electrician. Do you know, who could do that for me? And then we'll find that a lot of people using Knowify will say, well, we do mainly drywall work, but I know this electrician. If you can pay me for their contract, I'll hire them for you. I'll manage it. And it just gives them the benefit, as a homeowner, of not having to hire multiple people. They can hire one person to do several different types of work. And for the end user in Knowify, they actually can make some more money this way because they get to mark up, the electrician or whoever's going to be doing the other work that they're hiring. They get to mark up their work and bill it to the client. So it's a little bit of a win for everyone involved. In general, I mean, if they are a true general contractor, and a lot of residential remodelers and general contractors use our system, it's not uncommon for the work to be sent out as a bid. Or for bid, but we also see, especially if they're going to be one of these smaller trade contractors that are scaling up their business, they're not really sending out requests for bid as often as they're just sending out work orders and requests to have the work done. Obviously the end contractor can deny the work order. Maybe they don't have the time for it, and then you can resend it, to a different contractor. But we have a neat system in place in Knowify for you to request work from a subcontractor, not very indifferent from sending out a purchase order to a vendor. And what we're really helping out with is the ability to give you a little bit more information on which contractors you owe money to, how much you owe them through the life of the contract, if they've sent you change orders, whether to increase or decrease the amount of the contract. And so we really like to give the contractors the foresight and the information that they need so they can track all of this. And so now I'm going to open up my Knowify account and go over some of this information a little bit, starting with my 1099 workers. So just for starters, if you need to add an hourly contractor in your system, you actually want to add them as a vendor in Knowify. I can come in here, I could say add new vendor, and I can go ahead and give them a name. I'll just I usually go with musicians here. I'll call this guy John Paul Jones. We can give them an address, and this is just additional information if it's necessary. This is going to be nice later on if we are going to end up creating a user for them. I could say like, johnpj@gmail.com. That way, when we are sending them an invitation to join my Knowify account so they can be a mobile user, we have the email on file already. And the important thing here is to mark off this is a sub/1099 vendor option. It'll let me choose a role from my database, so I could say he's a laborer or whatever his type of work is. And when I add this, it'll sync them with my QuickBooks account. So now I have John Paul Jones in QuickBooks, but I also create him as a resource in my Knowify account, which means that I can actually go ahead and set a rate to this vendor in my admin section under rates. So you see John Paul Jones popped up. It shows me that he's a sub. I could say, we pay him $20 an hour. We give them the option to fill out the rest of the table if necessary. You don't really have to fill any of this out, and we find very commonly with 1099 vendors, people just have a set rate that they like to cost. But it's entirely up to you. If you want to fill out information for benefits, taxes, overhead, whatever you want to plug in, it's always an option. This is just going to be for the sake of the costing rate, and they're going to be automatically set up as what we would call a user with no access to Knowify. But for what it's worth, if you want to give any of these users access to the mobile app, you would say add user, user with mobile access only, user subcontract with mobile access only. And they'll let you choose them from your list of vendors that are marked as subs. So I can just click them and fill in the rest of their information. It'll send them an invitation to join my account. As far as tracking their time and the different costs of the job, it works just like any other time entry goes. I can come to my time tracker, enter time, and say, I'm doing time for John Paul Jones, and you see that they're labeled as subs just so I can delineate them from my actual full-time employees. I can always just add different pieces of work in here, different phases of different jobs, and we can enter their time for the week, and this is going to be how it's ended up getting costed to different jobs. Let's see, what was that? My 2 Wall Street. That one's for site prep. Here's for framing, first floor, second floor. We could separate this up as much as we want. And when it carries over to QuickBooks, it will actually use the whole sub-client structure if you're using that. I'll go ahead and submit this timesheet for the sake of job costing. That doesn't actually sync it with QuickBooks yet. This is just for the sake of seeing, the different hours submitted. We sync with QuickBooks when we go to review time and we approve entries. But just to show you how it's going to be reflected in the project plan for the sake of labor cost, here's John Paul Jones. Let's open up that project. This is actually an older project I set up way back in the day. But you can see that it's tracked, here's his hours and here's his cost of the project. It's using that $20 hourly rate times his 8 hours. This is how it's going to be reflected, and it's going to be adjusting this labor cost of the job. Just to show you on the QuickBooks side of things, basically the way this will work, when I open up my weekly timesheet, any approved hours, and you'll know that this is going to be very similar if you're familiar with our time sync with QuickBooks. This is going to be very similar to how we sync things when you enter time for your standard employees. I can see John Paul Jones's work setup or his timesheet for this week, and it's actually divided into the job and what phase of the job that's for, and I can see the hours submitted on each day. So we're really, sorting this out and making sure it gets the right, job and everything in your weekly timesheet in QuickBooks. And that's just how we'll be able to manage all of the 1099's time. Of course, if they're going to be entering their own timesheets via the mobile app, that's great because it'll just automatically pop up and review time for you. But for what it's worth, aside from being able to manually enter time here, we always give people access to the foreman view too, where I could say, he's on this project, and we can just pull up a list of employees, enter their time there. And then if they're using the smartphone app to check in and check out, we'll get it here. And it's just going to update all of your labor costs for the 1099ers in real time. Next, what I'm going to cover is how to actually manage our subcontracts that we are going to be having on lump sum with our vendors. So I'm going to open up a new project plan. I'm going to go to plan and track. And I always recommend that you use professional mode if you're hiring subcontractors because it provides a better flow. But basically, I want to add a job phase. I'll go ahead and call this something like painting. And I can enable subs on a project. This is going to be the key part of being able to track subcontractor costs to a job. When I enable subs, it lets me put in a subcontractor budget. Now, this isn't necessarily my contract amount, because this is when I would still be in the budgeting stage of a project, where I'm saying, like, I'll probably need to hire a painter for, let's call it $2,000. And we can manage other parts of the system here, where I can say, it doesn't have to be subcontractor only on this phase of the job. An older version of Knowify that was true, but now I can also have, a foreman here for 40 hours. We can have our own list of materials that's part of this job as well. And so now we have this all in the system. I can go ahead and save this to get the budget saved into the system. But another thing I'm going to be doing here is actually uploading my subcontractor. You see, we have this select subcontractor option that shows up as soon as we enable subs, where I can search my vendor database. Now, these vendors actually don't need to be synced up, they don't need to be marked as subs in our vendor database at this point in time. This is just my complete vendor database that's synced up with my QuickBooks database. We'll add them in either direction, so you can always add new ones in Knowify. We'll push it to QuickBooks or vice versa. But now I could say John Smith Paint & Co. This is also where I could input a final contract value. A lot of times, especially if you're going to be doing kind of smaller residential general contracting work, you have the contract value before you quote a price to the client, just so you know what you should be quoting. And if they send you a contract, that's what we would be uploading here. This is basically just a way for us to keep it on file. So if you need to be on the road and then you need to say, ooh, how much did I agree upon with John Smith Paint & Co., you can just pull up that PDF for reference. What this is going to do is open up a PO number for me. This is going to be how we reference this contract through the system. Now I have an outstanding $2,000 contract with John Smith Paint & Co., but I want to be able to see, how much has he sent me in bills, how much have I paid him, how much is remaining on the contract. And so this PO 182 is going to be kind of my hidden key to be able to get that information at any point in time in Knowify. What I'm going to do really quick before I get into too much depth on this is just kind of create the contract with the client. I'll click Create Proposal, use my project plan phases. I'm just going to do the classic 50% markup. And here's just some speed contracting. What I'm going to do next, now that the project's live, let's just say I didn't already have a contract signed with John Smith Painting Co. You see this little View PO button pops up next to his name on this phase of the job. If I click here, it'll actually open up my purchases module, and it gives me the option to email PO to subcontractor. Again, you'll notice this is actually very similar to the purchase order form that we would have, if you're sending out an order for materials. But this way, we actually have it labeled as a work order. We have some information on the job site. We have the subcontractor information loaded in here. And so that way you can say, include additional info and fill in information here. For what it's worth, if you actually had input the information into this work order field, this is the work you will be completing. And this is usually information that you set up for your mobile app users, but we can actually send that out to the to your subcontractor too as part of the work order. And so this is just a nice way to get a little bit of communication back to the sub and say, okay, email it right to John Smith at John Smith Painting Co. And we can even attach additional files as well if you have any kind of insurance forms or anything like that you need to send to them. And so, once we have this open and live in the system, it'll actually be tracked in our active purchases. This just shows me the current balance of this subcontract. And if I ever need to log a bill against it, I can do it a couple different ways. The roundabout way would be to log a bill against the PO number or against the vendor, where I can leave purchases, come to bills, add a new bill with either John Smith Painting Co. This is how it'll show me all of my outstanding contracts with them or purchases. So I can see, all right, here's the different lines of work I have agreed upon with them that I haven't been billed against. But I can also say processed by PO 182. And then it'll just show me that one contract. Now, what it shows me right off the bat is the full value of the contract. This is because I haven't logged any bills against it. So I can come in and say, he sent me an invoice, here's the number, it's due by the end of the week. And he's billing me right now for the first, let's call it $600 of this contract. When I submit this, it'll send it to QuickBooks as an outstanding bill in QuickBooks, of course. But it'll also take that out of the contract value. So basically, this is saying, take it out of the contract because he sent me the bill. It doesn't have anything to do with payments yet. Right now, it's just showing it as part of the job cost. And if I open up that webinar project, I can see that my subcontractor cost has gone up by $600. It's sorted into this phase of the job, and then it's very specifically labeled under the John Smith Painting Co. contract. I also get a little breakdown that says, okay, here's the first bill that was logged against this out of the $2,000 contract. Now, another shortcut to get to that same screen would be to just come to this, this plan and track section and click Add Subcontractor Bill. That basically automates the process of going to bills, clicking Add New, Process by PO, filling in this PO number, find PO items. And you can see that since I already logged a bill for $600 against this, now the outstanding balance of this is $1,400. I can also see that reflected in my purchases if I were to go there. But let's go ahead and log a different invoice here. This one's due a little bit later. Now I'm being billed for $500. Go ahead and submit this and send it to QuickBooks. Now, here's one place that the bidirectional sync with QuickBooks is always going to come in handy. If I go to my expenses, I can actually see that I'm going to have 2 outstanding bills with John Smith Painting Co. So if I want to actually log a payment here and write them a check, I can actually do that right out of QuickBooks, and it'll come back to Knowify and close out. And we can split it between 2 bills. So I'm going to go ahead and record payment for both outstanding bills here. Here we go, save and new. And next time I sync up with my QuickBooks account, it's actually going to close out these 2 bills. So right now they're shown as outstanding, but as soon as that sync completes, I'm going to go ahead and refresh this screen, and now they're closed out. And if I click include closed, I can actually see them here. And so that's just a nice way to be able to manage this in either software. You can have all of your payments still coming out of QuickBooks, and it'll always come back to Knowify and close out there. Now I can see, there's $900 left in John Smith Paint to Go's contract. That's great. But for what it's worth, a lot of times you will receive a change order from your subcontractor. So I can come down to this phase of the job. Instead of adding a subcontractor bill, I'll add a change order. Again, we let you upload files so you can keep that, on record on our cloud-based server. Let's say he's going to bill me for an additional $500. Now, the old outstanding balance of this purchase order was $900, but now I just received a $500 change order. So if I log another bill against this, it should actually be for $1,400 to show me the difference. I'll also be able to see that in purchases, of course. And then here's another neat little trick. If I'm in this purchase, I can click Create Bill for PO, and it'll just pull me right into this Add New Bill and fill in that info for me. So when they bill me for the remainder of this contract, I can go ahead and submit this, send it to QuickBooks, and it's going to close out that purchase so it's not in my system anymore. I can always view the history and see, what was agreed upon with John Smith Paint & Co., what is the outstanding balance, and this is how I can get a little bit more info on what's going on with this contract. Just to show you guys one last level of detail of these contracts and how they're managed, everything I showed you was kind of automated through the project plan and setting up subcontractor phases. All this is really doing is generating a flexible spending purchase order. You guys may have noticed that when you're creating a purchase, there's both itemized and flexible spending. That's really the difference between these. Is flexible spending is saying that it's going to have a lump sum value to it that we're going to bill against in increments, and we want it costed to the job as you receive the bill, not as the purchase order is placed. But now I can come back here and I can see that I spent $2,500 out of my budgeted $2,000. And the reason my budget is lower than my actual cost is just because I didn't account for the change order that had actually ended up being requested by my sub. And so that's just going to give me a little bit more information. If I need to hammer down and get more information, I can see I went over my subcontractor budget, specifically on this phase of the job. And this is exactly what happened. That's just about the scope of what I wanted to cover with this today. I saw a couple questions submitted. I'm going to go ahead and open those up and start the Q&A part of this. Feel free to submit any questions into this chat if you have any more questions. I'll try to get to them one at a time. Or if you want to use the Zoom raise hand function, I can pull you off of mute so we can chat as well. The first question is, can you also track subcontractor retainage? So this is actually a very good question, especially since we do obviously manage retainage when you have retained earnings from your client. As far as managing subcontractor retainage in Knowify goes, when you're hiring the sub, we don't have anything automated for it. But I'll show you another situation. I actually amended this project plan so I could add another phase. This is how you would always add additional subcontracts when necessary. We'll call this one drywall. I'll enable subs. And once the project plan is live, you don't really need to adjust the budget, but it's always nice if you want to have a running budget while you go through. The last one was 2,000. I'll call this one 1,500. So basically, if you want to be able to manage retainage in our system, it would basically be by unpaid bills. So I could say, let's say we're hiring John under a fixed price contract here instead of hourly. But I can actually log this, say add subcontractor bill. Now he did bill me for a full $500. And I'll go ahead and log that here. But we actually work with partial payments. So even though he technically billed me for $500, and that's what we're removing from the contract, since there's been some, since we're retaining some of the value, what we can do is say, well, we're going to record payment, but we're only going to pay them for $450 because we're holding on to 10% of that. That way it'll actually stay as outstanding in my system, and I can actually see that there's still an outstanding bill. I'm going to need to pay John Paul Jones $50 at some point, but we're not quite there yet. We got a question from Sebastian about max size of upload file. You know, I don't know if we do limit this. I am pretty sure we do limit it to image files, so it will need to be a PDF or a JPEG or a PNG file, something like that. And I think we may limit to 20 megabytes per file. Don't quote me on that because I'm not 100% sure. But you know, it's never really been an issue in the past. As long as you're only uploading image files, there's not likely going to be a situation where it's too big to fit in the system. Change orders to subcontractors. So I scraped the surface of this briefly, but basically you don't need to create a additional phase of the job unless you want to track it against a different purchase order number. What we let you do is come down to your contract with the sub. You know, here's John Paul Jones' contract. And I can click Add Change Order. This way, it'll actually increase the value of the existing change order. And what you're writing in here is the value. We suggest the value just based off of the contract. You can ignore this, really. You know, they're going to bill me for an additional $600. This way, I don't need to upload a new purchase order file or anything like that into the system. No, it's all just going to be on file. So whenever I log a bill, I know exactly how much I owe John Paul Jones for this type of work, for this type of job at this point in time. And so that's my way of making sure that I never get, you know, over or under billed by any of my subs. You know, I can always just come to my purchases and see what's outstanding. Anything flexible spending, best chances are it is going to be for a subcontractor. And that's where I can get some more information on what's outstanding at this point in time. Do we have any other questions from the group? Okay, cool. Well, thanks everyone for joining me. I'm happy I got a chance to give you all a little bit more information on this. Again, I will be posting the recording in our forums and our Facebook group, and I'm going to send everyone a group to join. I'm going to send everyone a link to request to join our Facebook group. Here's another question really quick. Sebastian's asking if there's an audit tracking mechanism. That's actually a very good question. Any subcontract is actually, since it's logged as a purchase, going to have an activity feed at the bottom where I can actually see that this PO was created from a subcontract. There was a bill logged against it. I can view that bill. The PO value was modified via a change order. I'm logged as Good Construction Co. in the system, but it would also show you which member, you know, of your Knowify account made these adjustments. So you always have that option as well. You can always see, you know, who's doing what and where these different changes are coming from. Again, just to give you guys some more info on kind of the follow-up after this, I'll send you guys an email with some more info, as well as the link to join our Facebook group. And I'm going to be posting this to our YouTube library. Our next presentation is scheduled for August 28th, I believe. It's a Monday, and we'll be doing it at 2 p.m. Eastern, so an hour earlier than this one was today. And I believe we will be having a special guest presentation from Tanya Schulte, covering labor costing and how to create your labor burdens and just a couple more things around that, and we're all pretty excited to hear what she has to say. So thanks again for joining. I'll be sending you guys some more info shortly, but hope to see you all at the next one. Have a nice day.